The endless dark of the universe is yours, if you but reach out to take it. Yield nothing. The void respects only strength.
Rogue Traders, originally called Rogue Traders Militant during the era of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, and bearing the ancient title of Lord Captain first granted by the Emperor himself, are unique and powerful human individuals who serve as a combination freelance explorer, conquistador, and interstellar merchant for the Imperium of Man. Every rogue trader is a hereditary imperial servant and high-ranking noble, given a starship, a crew, and sometimes a contingent of space marines, in very rare cases, or troops of the Astra Militarum, or mercenaries and carte blanche to roam those worlds of the galaxy that still lie beyond imperial control or knowledge. In their task of exploring and exploiting the still uncharted regions of the galaxy for mankind, rogue traders might come across worlds harboring long-forgotten human civilizations which will be later incorporated into the Imperium by official Adeptus Mechanicus. Explorator fleets and expeditions of the Navis Imperialis and Astra Militarum. Other times they find empty or alien-dominated planets ripe for colonization, conquest, or exploitation by the Imperium and themselves. The bearer of a sacred warrant of trade that empowers them to journey beyond the boundaries of the Imperium, to trade, explore, and make war in the God Emperor's name. A rogue trader is a unique figure in the grim darkness of the Imperium. They may be a newly entitled power on the rise or hail from a long dynastic lineage of nobles and voidfarers, but all bear their titles with pride, striking out into the unknown in search of fortune and glory. A rogue trader is a power unto themselves in the dark voids, master of all they survey, at least as far as their force of arms and sharpness of wits can press the claim. A rogue trader can be many things, but whether standing as diplomat before a planetary ruler, cutting a shadow deal in a void station undercity, bellowing orders amidst an armed host set upon plunder, or striding the bridge of a mighty starship, they remain one thing above all: free. Often rogue traders come from a dynasty of great leaders and visionary military commanders, with a renowned or darkly infamous lineage stretching back standard millennia. Other times they are from younger, more dynamic families, often coming from the ranks of the Adeptus Terra, the Imperial Navy, or the Astra Militarum. Whatever their origins, all rogue traders are first and foremost masters of their own fates, a rare thing in the Imperium of the 41st millennium, and upon their shoulders can rest the success or failure not only of their endeavors and their bloodlines, but of countless future generations and, often, the fortunes of entire worlds. Despite the fact that the weight of such responsibility is theirs to bear alone, a rogue trader invariably surrounds themselves with a coterie of allies and retainers. No rogue trader can undertake their mission alone, for no man or woman can be master of every single aspect of trade, exploration, exploitation, and war. As a result, all of the most successful rogue traders have the ingrained ability to recognize the value of others and their motivations and, as a leader, are able to utilize every weapon and ability in the human arsenal to their full potential. Though they must rely on others for the most specialized of skills, not to mention certain needful resources, it falls to the rogue trader to know how and when to exercise their own judgment and how to delegate where needed. They may not steer the helm of their void ship, nor fire and aim every macro cannon in person, but the rogue trader selects and commands those who do, and it is their orders that are obeyed. Likewise, they may know little of the arcane rites of the augur and auspex, but it is ultimately their decision whether or not to trust the word of the Mechanicus explorator who claims it safe to breathe the air of a newly discovered world. Rogue traders must always look to their own abilities and protection, regardless of the power of their allies, for there will always be those envious of their power and station, and countless rivals to their goals. As a result, most have a penchant for the very finest personal weapons and equipment their fortunes can acquire, for even friends can soon become enemies when a world's ransom is at stake. Some never leave their bridge without donning an ancient and revered suit of artificer armor resized for a mere mortal's frame, while others secret fiendishly cunning personal force field generators of alien manufacture beneath a gaudy uniform. None are ever unarmed, bearing even aboard their own vessels minute digital weapons and other implements of destruction. However they outwardly comport themselves, rogue traders must be supremely confident in their own abilities and able to walk away from even the most desperate situation, somehow having profited from their perilous adventure, even if that profit must be counted purely by their survival.
I claim this world in the name of the Emperor of Man and his Imperium. I bring justice and truth for the loyal, punishment, and death for the guilty, and the spoils I take by my own hand.
The rogue traders had their origins in the demands of the early days of the Great Crusade of the late 30th millennium. Driven by the will of the Emperor, the first expeditionary fleets of the Crusade pushed outwards into the galaxy, preceding each great expeditionary fleet of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of vessels often ranged smaller contingents of independent flotillas, led by a class of martial leader that would become known as the Rogue Traders Militant. Many of these individuals were former rulers of the numerous realms the Emperor had cast down first during the Unification Wars on Terra, and later, as the Great Crusade spread, formerly independent human colony worlds. They were offered a stark choice: bend the knee before the Emperor and swear service to the Great Crusade, or die by his hand. Though many set pride before what they regarded as slavery, others chose service and took up the Emperor's Warrant of Trade. There was a price, however. The Rogue Traders Militant were expected to scout ahead of the leading edge of the Great Crusade, accompanied by their own armies as well as whatever assets had been ceded them by the Emperor. Operating so far ahead of the Emperor's crusading armies, the Rogue Traders Militant could expect little or no aid should they encounter foes too powerful for them to overcome. After several solar decades penetrating the inky black of the void, Rogue Trader Militant fleets often appeared as ramshackle vagabonds, many of their starships taken from defeated enemies, sometimes including Xenos vessels of entirely novel or esoteric form. They were forbidden to return to Terra, for in his wisdom the Emperor sought not to just rid himself of powerful rivals, but to ensure that even in their deaths they might serve mankind. Many vanished alone and unheralded, slain, consumed, or enslaved by nameless Xenos abominations far from the light of Terra. The Imperium of Man is a vast, scattered realm extending over almost the entire galaxy, impinging itself upon the more compact areas of alien-settled space. The million or more human-inhabited worlds the Imperium controls are but a tiny fraction of the galactic whole. Then there are the fringes and halo zones, remote areas where the Astronomicon does not reach, and where the only human settlers are renegades or pioneering groups whose ancestors were forgotten by the Emperor's servants millennia ago. Most of the Milky Way galaxy remains unexplored, unknown, and extremely dangerous, even in the 41st millennium. The potential of new worlds, alien civilizations, and unimaginable resources made necessary a class of free-ranging Imperial agents known as Rogue Traders. Licensed and often equipped by the Adeptus Terra, the Rogue Trader is free to explore the far regions of the galaxy, the areas where the Astronomicon does not reach, and those areas within its reach as yet unvisited by humanity. Rogue traders have even attempted to cross the great starless voids of intergalactic space, but over such distances even astropaths' powers of psychic communication are useless, and whether such missions have succeeded is unknown. Operating in isolation from the central authority of the Imperium, the rogue trader must decide for themselves how to react to alien cultures, new discoveries, and threats. If they judge an intelligent Xenos race to be potentially dangerous, they may attempt to destroy it or to gather as much information as they can so that others may do so. If they decide a Xenos race may be of use to humanity, they may attempt to make contact and establish diplomatic and economic relations. If merely rich in technology or minerals, a planet may be plundered, and the rogue trader will return to Terra or their homeworld laden with the treasures of space, alien artifacts, rare and precious minerals, and undreamed-of technologies. Needless to say, the rogue trader requires a considerable resource in voidcraft, troops, and other staff if they are to complete their mission. Their total responsibility may extend to dozens of voidcraft, often huge, lumbering cargo vessels crammed with a small army, a full crew of technicians and volunteer settlers to establish colonies on new worlds. Most important, however, are the fighting troops, for it is they who will have to deal with any potential threat. Many rogue traders are individuals who have reached a position of power within the Imperium's governing hierarchy. These individuals are often drawn from the ranks of the Adeptus Terra, the Navis Imperialis and Astra Militarum, or even the Inquisition. A few are influential civilians, amongst whom the navigators are the most famous. Politics sometimes obliges this course, for free of Imperial command, the rogue trader is also conveniently out of the way, beyond the center of real power in the Emperor's realm. Rogue traders have a reputation as outcasts. Many are people whom the high-ranking officials of the Adeptus Terra's myriad branches deem better kept at a safe distance from the throne world. Operating beyond Imperial control, rogue traders are a law unto themselves. Some are highly pious individuals, bringing the God Emperor's light beyond the edges of his rule. Others are nothing more than glorified pirates and scoundrels. Many rogue traders exude confidence and are highly charismatic, often charming and roguish, skilled diplomats, some would say confidence tricksters, and hardened killers when the situation demands. Rogue traders will often gather an entourage of hangers-on and companions, and this may contain alien warriors, mutants, and other undesirables unacceptable in polite imperial society. Many Puritans in the Inquisition would take to marking the rogue trader out as a heretic. Many rogue traders have highly unstable personalities. Some destroy worlds on a whim or experiment with alien species out of macabre curiosity. All rogue traders are highly exceptional individuals who are driven to success beyond the dreams of the ordinary men and women of the Imperium, even though these exceptional people often have extreme character quirks themselves. Some destroy entire worlds for the slightest reason, or include alien warriors and mutants among their entourage in direct violation of imperial orthodoxy. Some are highly pious servants of the God Emperor, while others are no more than legitimized pirates. The most infamous rogue trader was John van Jastobal, who became little more than an officially sanctioned desperado, plundering whatever world he came upon. Rogue traders are often flamboyant individuals, commonly dressed in the most extravagant finery they can acquire. However, each rogue trader is a unique individual from a particular background. Some newly created rogue traders come from origins in the Astra Militarum, the Navis Imperialis, the merchant fleets, the Administratum, or even the Imperial Inquisition, where they will have developed unique outlooks, skills, and approaches to different situations. Some rogue traders are relatively poor, possessing a single ancient and dilapidated starship. Others are incredibly wealthy and powerful and have whole fleets of warships and entire private armies at their disposal. Certain favored individuals may even call upon detachments of space marines, having entered mutually beneficial pacts with individual chapters. Some rogue traders operate as mercenaries, renting the service of their ships to the highest bidder, including pirates. Other rogue traders or an imperial organization like the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Astra Militarum, or the Inquisition. In the wake of the birth of the Great Rift, nearly 100 rogue traders were invited to Macragge for an emergency symposium. The summons bore the seal of Robert Guilliman, the resurrected Primarch of the Ultramarines, Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, and thus was an honor no one in the Imperium could refuse. From this magnificent beginning would stem a truly hellish journey. It had been many thousands of Terran years since so many rogue traders were gathered in one location. It was rare enough for a handful to meet. Many of the assembled rogue traders had guessed the purpose of the quorum by the time they had arrived, for Ultramar had been ravaged by war. The sovereign domain of the Ultramarines chapter, once thought inviolable given its peerless infrastructure and many-layered defenses, had been broken open and brought to ruin on a dozen fronts by the demon Primarch Mortarion and his Death Guard during the conflicts known as the Plague Wars. Though Guilliman had returned following the end of the first phase of the Indomitus Crusade in securing the Imperium Sanctus to lead a masterful defense of his realm, the aftermath would take solar decades, if not standard centuries, to resolve. Many of the rogue traders genuflected as the Primarch entered the halls, but Guilliman bid them stand. He spoke to them as equals, as was his way. The Primarch claimed that the Imperium was not just being invaded, but locked in a struggle for its spirit as much as its body. The realm of Ultramar had been afflicted with plagues, each supernatural in origin and voracious in its spread. Before the invading forces of chaos had been driven back to the Scourge Stars, a trio of conquered Imperial star systems, many of the moons and planets under Guilliman's rule had been racked by the spoor of Nurgle, the dark god that Mortarion and his fallen traitor legion called Lord and Master. During the Indomitus Crusade, Guilliman had traveled across the war-riven galaxy and seen his father's empire in flames. He knew every resource would be needed to save mankind, and even as he took the fight to humanity's enemies, his statesman-like mind dwelled on how the Imperium would recover from its losses. To this end, he knew the rogue traders would be vital. The rogue traders that Guilliman had selected were to fight for the Imperium's future, not as warriors or bureaucrats, but as pioneers. The front line upon which they would face their destiny was not that of the battlefield, but of deep and uncharted space. They were to find new worlds to conquer in the name of the Emperor, fresh lands upon which mankind could settle and thrive. While warp storms had cut off much of the galaxy in the wake of the Cicatrix Maledictum's birth, they had also opened up never-before-explored warp routes upon the fringes of Imperial space. There could be found opportunity, hope, and such danger that meant many of the rogue traders would never return. Guilliman gave those gathered at the symposium on Macragge the opportunity to leave, to walk away without a stain on their honor, for it was a perilous task he proposed. Since the opening of the Great Rift, the Astronomicon had been occluded more than ever, and the creatures of the warp seemed to haunt every space lane and distant moon. Yet not one of those assembled took a backward step. Some remained out of pride, some out of duty, some out of a sense of adventure. But all were to find themselves set on a new path that would see them meet either victory or inglorious damnation. Within solar days, the fleets of the rogue traders had left the realm of Ultramar, bound for the yawning reaches of space beyond the eastern fringe and the extremities of the Ultima Segmentum's spiral arm. Most carried in their holds large populations of ultramarin colonists kept in cryogenic hyperfreeze, seeking a new and better life somewhere else. Out there were the youngest stars in the galaxy, those most likely to have untouched planets in their orbits, and therefore most likely to have habitable lands. That all hoped to find territories unspoilt by the ravages of chaos was an unspoken truth. Each rogue trader fleet took a different heading, their navigators guiding them through the warp towards destinations unknown. They all underwent challenges upon the way, and some found nothing but cruel and violent ends. The most valuable possession of a rogue trader is his or her Imperial Warrant of Trade, an ancient legal document which describes and sanctions the accepted limits of a rogue trader and his descendants' operations across the galaxy within the framework of Imperial law. These charters are hereditary and thus create an entire rogue trader dynasty when they are issued. These dynasties are granted a personal coat of arms identifying their members amongst the Imperial nobility. Rogue traders are empowered with the authority by the High Lords of Terra to travel freely within the Imperium and beyond. This allows them to legally interact with cultures which normal Imperial citizens are forbidden contact with, because they are non-imperial human worlds or Xenos-controlled planets. Not only that, but rogue traders are granted the permission and freedom to deal with these cultures as they see fit, so long as it is judged to be in the interests of the Imperium. Having said that, it can be assumed that a renegade rogue trader guilty of heresy or treason will be severely prosecuted by the Inquisition if discovered and captured. Their punishment will be that much more severe if they are deemed undeserving of the Emperor's extraordinary trust in their family. Rogue traders usually return within the boundaries of Imperial space every few Terran years to unload their exotic wares and resupply, recruit, and rest until their next foray into the darkness of unknown space. During these periods, they may come into conflict with members of the Adeptus Terra or the Inquisition based on their activities during their most recent expedition. Rogue traders wield incredible political, economic, and military power beyond the Imperium's frontiers, and it is easy for them to forget that once back within the borders of the Imperium, they do not have free rein to act as they wish. This strident attitude will draw attention from the authorities. Many rogue traders dispute the right of the Imperium to exercise authority over them. As individuals who have wandered amongst alien stars and conversed with all manner of cultures, rogue traders are viewed as susceptible to all kinds of heresies, from wayward philosophies to infection by alien creatures or possession by warp entities that live in the darkness between stars. All of these factors can lead to violent confrontation, particularly if the rogue trader has knowledge or an artifact that others within the Imperial hierarchy of equal or greater power covet. No two rogue traders are exactly alike, but all are exceptional individuals with a drive and personal ambition that sets them far above the teeming ranks of humanity. They come from a wide range of backgrounds, but all appear fated or cursed by the title they bear. A great many rogue traders have served in the Navis Imperialis, the Imperial Navy. This is hardly surprising, as they are expected to command entire armadas of void ships, and few would wish to delegate such responsibility to a subordinate. As a consequence, many rogue traders are exceptionally skilled captains of their vessels and admirals of their fleets, able, even keen, to take on enemies the likes of which may never have been encountered by the Imperium and emerge victorious. Many would have been considered mavericks by their contemporaries in the Imperial Navy, for their methods and tactics might run contrary to the doctrines of space combat taught at the Segmentum fortresses. Those whose ideas genuinely are too extreme tend not to survive long, though the manner of their death might form the basis of legend and rumor for many Terran centuries to come. Those with a genuine talent, even one based on ideas the Imperial Navy could never fully endorse, might go on to achieve great things once released from the service of the notoriously conservative Imperial military establishment. Many rogue traders who once served in the Imperial Navy maintain a network of contacts across the sector in whose battle fleet they served and beyond. As such, they might be able to call upon old friends, perhaps individuals they served beside as officer cadets. Such contacts can provide all manner of aid when really needed, from emergency supplies to official Imperial help against pirate or alien attack. Most rogue traders prefer to get by on their own skills and only call in such favors when things get desperate. Many prefer not to call in a favor from an old contact recently made a Commodore, when that same individual might one day be a High Admiral and therefore able to provide even greater aid. Rogue traders from a naval background often maintain the trappings of their former rank, ornamented with all manner of additional finery. Thus, a rogue trader might wear a formal dress coat similar to that worn by a High Admiral, even if he had never attained such rank himself, complete with rows of medals and awards, gold-braided epaulets, and meters of elaborate piping. Yet he might wear his hair braided in the fashion of some feral world tribe, or facial tattoos in the style of an anarchic hive city gang. Alongside a treasured Imperial Navy cutlass, he might carry a sword of unknown yet unmistakably Xenos manufacture, or bear other weapons traded with or stolen from any one of 100 bizarre societies. The Astra Militarum is another Imperial military institution from which rogue traders may be drawn. Those who have risen above service in a single regiment to lead the vast, diverse armies of the Imperial Guard might be granted a warrant of trade to take their crusade beyond the borders of the Imperium's space and out into the great unknown. These individuals are not only masters of ground-based combat, but gifted in the arts of strategy. Some become great admirals as well as great generals, while others have the foresight to delegate command of their vessels to underlings, concentrating their own prodigious skills on the bigger strategic picture. Rogue traders from such a background often amass huge ground forces and use their fleets to bring these to bear in devastating planetary assaults. Beyond the reach of the Imperium, such individuals will be forced to husband their forces in a manner they may be unused to, lest they exhaust their finite resources with little or no hope of recruiting fresh troops. Should their ground forces suffer high losses, the rogue trader will be forced to recruit from those worlds they have already conquered or colonized. In the case of human societies rediscovered after generations of isolation from the broader galaxy, they may establish a system of feudal duty whereby the planet is required to send its warriors to serve in the rogue traders' fleets, or they may be forced to demand or coerce service in their armies. Some rogue traders have even resorted to recruiting the services of alien mercenaries or auxiliaries, a practice highly frowned upon by the authorities of the Imperium. Out beyond the fringes, however, rogue traders are a power entirely unto themselves. Who knows what bizarre forces roam the halo zones ostensibly in the service of the Imperium? In appearance, these militant rogue traders vary hugely. Many wear the trappings of the regiment from which they were originally drawn, which, unlike the formalized uniforms of the Imperial Navy, is often specific to the culture of the regimental homeworld. They may also wear elements of the uniforms of the Imperial General Staff, including a long, elaborate coat or peaked cap. The many who prefer to lead their conquests from the front line mix such dress in a manner more appropriate to their warrior background, combining a dress uniform with carapace armor or even power armor modified to fit a normal-sized human. As with other types of rogue trader, these individuals carry all manner of unusual weaponry, including exotic sensor and force field devices normally only available to the upper echelons of the Inquisition or Officio Assassinorum. While the weapons carried by a rogue trader of an Imperial Navy background might be considered for show, those carried by one from an Astra Militarum origin are generally more practical and far more devastating, having been handcrafted for them and covered in elegant engravings, or recovered from the body of a defeated foe and kept not only as a trophy, but valued for some uniquely destructive capability it possesses. Through their long and varied careers, some adepts of the Adeptus Administratum might amass considerable personal power, holding sway over a small empire of divisions and departments with responsibilities across dozens of planetary systems. Invariably, these men and women will be ruthless, calculating individuals who have worked their way to the very top of the Imperium's massive bureaucracy by any means possible, crushing their foes and thwarting endless assassination attempts to stay in power. Many of these officials will have been assigned to such tasks as the suppression of a rebellious sector or enforcing the Imperium's rule on human colonies recently rediscovered and brought back into the Emperor's fold. These individuals will be masters in the precise application of political and bureaucratic power, able to bring to bear any weapon at their disposal, from the military might of the Space Marines to the secret arts of political manipulation. As such, some make ideal rogue trader material. An Imperial administrator given command of a rogue trader fleet will be a politician first and a leader second, though the most successful will combine both roles or switch between the two with masterful skill. They will amass their resources and appoint leadership of the various arms of their fleet to those they not only trust, but can also destroy should they challenge the rogue trader in any way. They will keep their underlings in perpetual competition against one another, encouraging them to seek their patronage and approval at the expense of their rivals. Unlike rogue traders of a more martial background, These men and women rarely engage in overt displays of their personal combat prowess, preferring instead to exert their power by way of an assassin's knife in the dark rather than crass displays of military might. In appearance, these Machiavellian princelings often prefer to remain comparatively inconspicuous. They might wear the vestments of their former positions, such as the monkish robes of the scribe and the adept. Others wear more ornate dress, but keep the colors dark and subdued, lending them a brooding, menacing aspect and hinting at the foolishness of crossing them. They tend not to wear conspicuous weaponry, yet only a fool would assume that such an individual would be unable to defend themselves. These rogue traders always carry small yet deadly weapons such as digital lasers or concealed power blades, and invariably some form of personal force field generator that will protect from the attacks of an enemy in battle or a treacherous underling at court. Most of the cultures of the Imperium's worlds remain comparatively isolated, with only a handful of a planet's population ever undertaking a journey to another star system. Yet despite this parochialism, most Imperial worlds rely on trade with those in the nearby stellar vicinity for many of their needs to be met. Weapons and other items of advanced technology must be imported from those worlds with the expertise and capacity to produce them, while such centers of industry may require rare natural resources, which must be imported. In addition, the aristocratic ruling classes of many worlds crave the exotic, often paying outrageous sums for goods imported from distant locales. Clothes, foodstuffs, jewelry, and art are all highly desirable to those who wish to make a display of their wealth and influence, whether real, imagined, or feigned in the interests of fashion. An entire imperial class has grown up over the millennia, existing solely to meet the demands of interplanetary commerce. The merchant interests of the Imperium take many forms, from cartels to federations and small concerns to mighty galaxy-spanning corporations. Most center their efforts on a relatively small group of worlds or a stretch of a lucrative trade route through the warp, for the fragmented and feudal nature of the Imperium does not facilitate a stable galaxy-wide economy. For many of these merchants, trade and war are one and the same. They must protect their interests by any means possible. For some, that means maintaining small private armies or sponsoring mercenaries for just such a purpose. These very literal trade wars might be fought against competitors or other parties that threaten their interests, from pirates to aliens. It should come as no surprise that the most accomplished of imperial merchant leaders are as capable generals as they are traders, applying the same doctrines to both pursuits. These persons make ideal rogue traders. Rogue traders from a merchant background are often the most astute and successful, equally at home facing an opponent across the negotiating table as on the field of battle, though sometimes the two are one and the same. The armies and fleets they employ might be drawn from their own substantial holdings, or they might be able to call upon a complex network of obligation, drawing upon mercenaries and trading partners from across a broad spectrum of their trade. Mercantile rogue traders often dress in the manner of opulent heads of state, bedecking themselves in fine jewelry, most of which is in fact some hidden weapon, force field, or sensor. They surround themselves with individuals indentured to their service before birth, drawing on familial connections that often stretch back in time for many generations. Their vessels often take on the appearance of space-going palaces crammed with all manner of outrageous ostentation. Yet it is a foolish opponent indeed who writes off such a rogue trader as a fop or dilettante. Many in fact cultivate such an air, treating it as just one more weapon in a not inconsiderable arsenal. While most imperial commanders occupy a hereditary seat of power only relinquished and passed on in the event of their own death, there are those who do pass beyond even such a lofty position and take to the stars as rogue traders. The most common cause for such a change in career is that the planetary governor has been replaced or deposed in some manner, yet remained of use to the Adeptus Terra. Perhaps an imperial commander has lost their world to alien invasion, yet has retained a measure of their assets, such as their own planetary defense forces and defense fleets. Some such individuals may be appointed to rogue trader status and given the opportunity to conquer for themselves and for the Imperium a new planet. These rogue traders may well be motivated by the need to re-establish all that they may have lost. They are commonly highly charismatic, commanding the loyalties of their dispossessed subjects. Their fleets are massive conglomerations of whatever vessels escaped the destruction of their planet, accompanied by whatever assets the Imperium might assign to them. The subjects often fight all the harder than the followers of other types of rogue trader, for they are driven by their loss and motivated by the need to claim for themselves some manner of recompense. Those not able to fight form a cadre of colonists, each with an assigned role in the new society they dream of one day establishing. Such rogue traders vary enormously in appearance and personality, but they often come to embody the culture of their lost homeworld. Local modes of fashion are exaggerated far beyond their original form, and dialects and customs are held dearly lest they be forgotten forever. Although rare, there are recorded cases of an inquisitor being granted the Warrant of Trade and taking up the rank of rogue trader. The most likely reason this might occur is as a result of political maneuvering within the Inquisition itself, perhaps resulting in the outmaneuvered individual being offered the warrant as an alternative to a far less desirable outcome. Upon being granted the warrant, the Inquisitor will understand that they have no alternative but to accept. As it is most often members of the alien-hunting Ordo Xenos who find themselves being appointed as rogue traders, these individuals will be well equipped for their new career. Although no longer able to call on the nigh-limitless resources of the Inquisition, the rogue trader will still wield considerable powers and influence. The main difference between their old and new roles is the context. Rather than hunting out corruption, heresy, and treachery within the populace of the Imperium, they will be seeking such threats out amongst alien stars, and will no doubt prosecute their new duty with as much vigor as they did their old. It is not only fully appointed inquisitors who may become rogue traders, for their many and varied servants and acolytes might end up in such a position too. Those agents of the Inquisition of lower rank would consider themselves fortunate indeed to be made a rogue trader, for the alternatives are often too terrible to dwell upon should the true price for whatever deed has earned their elevation be exacted. It should be noted that although rogue traders are shipmasters who travel the vastness of space, their authority to do so comes not from a merchant charter as usually granted by the Administratum to the chartist captains of the Imperial merchant fleets, but rather a letter of appointment known as a Warrant of Trade that elevates them to a level of imperial authority and status equaling that held by Space Marine chapter masters, inquisitors, and imperial planetary governors. Some of the more ancient warrants are dated from the very beginnings of the Imperium, and some were even signed by the Emperor himself. Others were signed by the Primarchs or other leaders of the Great Crusade. These charters are very valuable and give their owners great leeway. They are tailor-made and unique. A rogue trader's authority cannot be appealed since it comes directly from the Emperor, as according to imperial law and the religious dogma of the Imperial Creed, no one is empowered to overrule those persons who have received the God Emperor's direct, divine sanction. Certain powerful lords of the Adeptus Terra offer warrants of trade as a bribe to their rivals. The rival simply walks away into a life of adventure and wealth and no longer causes trouble for their political opponents in the various imperial organizations. Letters of marque are similar documents to warrants of trade that have been issued more recently by the Imperium to less powerful individuals, though their bearers are still called rogue traders. The letters of marque are rather restricted in some aspects and controlled more effectively by imperial authorities. These restrictions may be of an astrogeographical nature. For example, the rogue trader is restricted to operating in a single sector, or something similar. The more recent letters of marque are also not hereditary. Hopeful heirs must return and reapply to the High Lords of Terra through the Administratum for a new charter. Though a warrant of trade or a letter of marque grants extraordinary freedoms within the Imperium, they also invariably contain particular conditions. Sometimes rogue traders will be required to make regular visits to certain troublesome imperial worlds, or sent to enact military action on worlds which do not require the full force of the Imperial Navy's segmentum and sector battle fleets. More often, however, rogue traders will be required to travel outside the established territories of the Imperium in the name of settlement or exploration of new worlds that do not yet know the blessings of the God Emperor. The Warrant of Trade is the instrument by which a rogue trader is granted their lofty position and the legal method by which they exercises their considerable powers. New warrants are granted on the highest of authorities, usually by the office of the High Lords of Terra themselves, and by extension, the Emperor. The issuing of a warrant is an occasion of great significance, marked by extravagant pomp and ceremony, for it marks the establishment of a new imperial noble line that, should the recipient prove successful, might conquer and rule entire regions of space in the name of the Imperium, thus expanding mankind's domains. Warrants of trade are issued for many reasons. Some are granted in recognition of a great service done to the Imperium, while others are created for entirely political ends. Rogue trader warrants are hereditary. Once one is issued, it will be passed down from one generation to the next, at least for as long as there are heirs extant to receive it. Many rogue trader lines die out, and yet more are created to replace them, ensuring a constant supply of individuals driven to expand the Imperium's holdings. The reasons for the granting of a warrant of trade include the following. One of the most common circumstances under which a warrant of trade is offered is in recognition of military service to the Imperium. In a galaxy at war on 1,000 different fronts, Lord Generals and High Admirals lead dozens of mighty Imperial crusades to retake entire regions lost to rebellion or alien invasion. Such mighty leaders have under their command millions of warriors and hundreds of warships, and over the course of a crusade lasting solar decades, they might claim dozens of planets in the name of the Emperor. Those individuals who succeed will be honored at the very highest levels, decorated with a multitude of medals, have victory parades, high days and celebrations held in their name, and even have whole planets named after them. Such men and women rarely retire having completed their life's work, however, and they are often restless and uncomfortable in non-military circles. The boundless and untamable energies of such leaders are best put to good use, and appointment to the rank of rogue trader comes to many as a welcome outlet that can benefit the Imperium. Just as some servants of the Imperium are granted the warrant of trade in genuine thanks and recognition for their services to mankind, others are granted the rank because the alternative would be far worse. Throughout history, men and women granted leadership over a crusade fleet have conquered in the name of the Imperium, only to establish themselves as rulers of the new realms. Sometimes these leaders have maintained at least a semblance of fealty to the Imperium, with the Adeptus Terra accepting the new regime so long as tithes are paid and other obligations met. Yet, on many other occasions, these rulers have become so accustomed to absolute power that they desire to hold on to it for all time, rejecting their imperial masters and setting themselves up as total rulers of the regions they have fought so hard to conquer. The only recourse in such a situation is yet another imperial crusade to dislodge the pretender. Far better, then, to avoid the situation entirely by keeping the conqueror distracted with yet more regions to conquer, leaving the administrators of the Adeptus Terra to complete the pacification in their wake. Many a warrant of trade has been granted in order that a Lord Militant might simply conquer region after region until they have expended their forces and are no longer a political threat, real or potential, to the wider Imperium. To have risen to a position of influence and power within the labyrinthine structures of the Imperium's bureaucracy, an individual must, by the force of their own personality, be exceptionally driven. Just to be noticed amongst the teeming billions of the Imperium, one must be willing to promote oneself with ruthless efficiency. The types of people that attain such lofty stations might be noble and self-sacrificing, but it is just as likely they are ignoble and self-serving. For those of rank, a multitude of ways exist to attain every conceivable personal ambition, and for some, the warrant of trade is that ultimate goal. Just why a highly placed official would desire the warrant of trade will depend on their own particular, sometimes flawed, personality, and the manner in which they attain it will depend on their circumstance or on situations they can engineer. More than likely, it will involve prodigious bribes at the very highest of levels, or on calling in outstanding debts and favors from every possible source. Once the warrant is granted to such a person, they will be keen to use it to attain their every ambition. Some will desire to carve out small stellar empires beyond the reach of the Imperium, while others may want to establish the foundations of a mighty noble lineage, even if they themselves will not be around to see how future generations prosper. It has often been noted that many rogue traders are vain and egotistical, and that many more are simply venal and megalomaniacal. Some individuals, by means fair and foul, attain high rank in the service of the Imperium by politicking or murdering their way to the very top. Over the course of a lifetime, extended far beyond the natural span of human years by rare and expensive genetic and chemical rejuvenation procedures, such a person will have come into conflict with all manner of political opponents, earning the bitter enmity of the few others they can count as peers. It may come to pass that such an individual stands at the very brink of the culmination of a lifetime's political maneuvering, and an appointment to sector governor or even High Lord of Terra is the only remaining rung on the political ladder left to climb. At such times, it may be that an individual's many political rivals mobilize against them, drawing on every shred of their own influence to rid themselves of their enemy once and for all. Yet, being too powerful to oust, some in this position find a warrant of trade foisted upon them as a convenient way of getting rid of them once and for all. Such an honor cannot be refused, and the newly appointed rogue trader has no choice but to accept their fate, demurring politely as speeches are made in honor of all the great deeds they will perform in this, their ultimate service to the Imperium that appreciates them so. For these rogue traders, the warrant of trade is a bitter reward, for it signals the victory of their political opponents. Despite the unwanted nature of the warrant, these rogue traders do often go on to achieve great success, reaving across the stars, conquering dozens of planets, and amassing personal fortunes far in excess of what they might have attained otherwise. Some of these individuals return solar decades later to enact their revenge on their erstwhile opponents, perhaps waiting until the key conspirators have retired to some private garden world paradise before dispatching an assassin, or indeed a private army, to settle the matter once and for all. Of course, the powers and trappings of a warrant of trade do not come without a cost. A rogue trader fleet might be a significant military force, and the warrant will often come with a number of conditions attached to it. In fact, it would be a sure sign that an individual is being virtually exiled if no conditions were attached, the authorities clearly hoping the recipient will go and get themselves killed somewhere beyond their concern. Conditions attached to a warrant may take many forms, but invariably involve some form of military service or intervention. The most common types of conditions attached to a warrant of trade are discussed below. A common condition under which a warrant of trade is granted is that a particular world be visited by the rogue trader and their fleet. The world may have been isolated for some time, or, for whatever reason, simply not visited by any authority of the Imperium in a generation or more. Perhaps the tithes have been short or slow to be rendered, and the Imperium's bureaucracy has finally decided to investigate matters. If such a world is distant and other, more pressing concerns have diverted attention, then it may not be practical to task an Administratum mission or Imperial Navy squadron to press home the matter. Instead, a newly appointed rogue trader might very well be required to make a brief layover at the troublesome world. In all likelihood, contact with the planet in question will have been sporadic or non-existent, or concerning and fragmentary communications might be all that have been logged. The rogue trader will be tasked with undertaking the equivalent of a state visit, complete with all the regal pomp and circumstance of a visiting imperial noble. Dress uniforms and badges of office will be flaunted, retinues and honor guards deployed, bands assembled, and flags waved. This is all for show, of course, and is intended to remind the world's leadership in a very real fashion that the Imperium still exists and has not forgotten about them or the tithes they owe. The rogue trader will be expected to attend state banquets and high-level talks, acting in essence as a diplomat, even an ambassador of the Imperium. The Imperial commander of most backwater planets will be sufficiently cowed by such a display, particularly with a small fleet of warships in geosynchronous orbit over their seat of power. The rogue trader will be wined and dined and treated as royalty, and given every assurance that any shortfall in the tithe is clearly a minor inconvenience and entirely innocent, and asked to convey the planetary governor's personal assurances to the Administratum that all will be made right as soon as possible. Some imperial planetary governors do not welcome the rogue trader's visit, however, either showing overt resistance or displaying obvious reluctance to comply with imperial mandates. In such cases, the rogue trader is required to launch a punitive strike to encourage the recalcitrant world's cooperation with the servants of the Emperor. In cases where a flag-waving mission has proved unsuccessful, or a world has already openly rejected the rule of the Imperium, the rogue trader will have no option but to use force. Few newly appointed rogue traders want to squander their resources on the first bush war they encounter, so a hard-hitting show of force is often used to demonstrate the futility of further resistance. A land strike from orbit often proves the rogue trader means business, particularly if aimed at key infrastructure targets, thus weakening the Imperial planetary governor's ability to rule their planet. Alternatively, a strike against a location particularly valued by the Imperial commander might change their stance. The destruction of a luxurious winter palace or rural hunting lodge, for example. In the unlikely event that this initial show of force does not prove sufficient, then a more protracted campaign may be required. No rogue trader wishes to become embroiled in such a war, but sometimes it simply cannot be avoided. If the rogue trader's remit extends to actually dethroning the planetary governor in question, then many will proceed to such a course as soon as possible. This usually ends the matter in short order, a more compliant replacement being selected according to whatever political system put them in power in the first place. Settlement of new worlds in the name of the God Emperor of mankind may be a condition placed on a warrant of trade. The explorator fleets of the Adeptus Mechanicus are ever investigating the wonders of the galaxy, relentlessly recording and cataloging celestial phenomena and stellar bodies. A report of a habitable world will be dispatched to the Administratum, along with whatever data can be gathered on it by preliminary investigation by an explorator team. If the world proves of no great interest to the tech priests, perhaps because it harbors no resources or life forms of immediate use to them, then its details will be transmitted and filed away for future generations to follow up as they will. The Imperium's bureaucracy being as it is, the report may progress through the data mills of the Administratum for many standard years, even centuries, before finally crossing the desk of a clerk tasked with dispatching settlement missions to such worlds to claim them in the name of mankind. In the span of time between an exploration being logged and a settlement mission being dispatched, any number of fates might have befallen the planet. The ebb and flow of galactic war might have reduced its surface to radioactive dust, or aliens might have claimed it for their own ends. It is not unknown for a rogue trader to arrive in orbit over such a world only to find it utterly uninhabitable, or in fact incorrectly categorized in the first place. They will then have a colony ship and some thousands of settlers to dispose of, and it is not uncommon for a particularly callous individual to insist the colonists carry out their mission regardless, landing the prefabricated colony units wherever they can or else. Very few colonies established under such circumstances last more than a standard year, while a very small minority may somehow survive against all the odds, alone in the darkness out beyond the fringes of imperial rule. Every standard year, unrecorded numbers of the Imperium's worlds fall to rebellion, alien invasion, or natural disaster. A common condition of the granting of a warrant of trade is that such worlds be brought back into the fold by the application of overt military power. Such missions are never what could be described as diplomatic, unless a transmission demanding immediate surrender can be counted as an ambassadorial communique. Intelligence on such lost worlds might be incomplete or compromised, based on accounts long out of date or deliberately covered up. The rogue trader will be operating on the level of a Lord Militant leading an Imperial crusade, and for such missions, additional military forces might be seconded to their command. In some cases, the Space Marines of the Adeptus Astartes might accompany the fleet, usually for a short time only, but occasionally for extended periods. Though they may well act as a figurehead, the rogue trader will not be in direct command of such units, and an administrative body will be formed, often titled a Crusader Council. Strategy and political issues will be debated until the best use of the fleet's assets is agreed upon, calling on all the diplomatic skills of the rogue trader. Each of the seats on such a council is occupied by an individual of considerable power, and no Imperial Navy Admiral, Astra Militarum General, or Space Marine Chapter Master would agree to a course of action that squandered their own resources. The degree of the rogue trader's involvement over the course of such a crusade will depend very much on their own background. An individual of a militant disposition may closely oversee the deployment of the fleet's military forces, while a particularly belligerent one may actually take a hand in the fighting personally. Those of a more bureaucratic nature are more likely to delegate such matters to their military advisors. There are those rogue traders for whom the entire crusade will represent a massive inconvenience, and these will deal with the situation in their own unique manner, seeking to extricate themselves and their ships from the mission of the crusade so that they can continue on their way for their own ends. Exploration is the essential mission of all rogue traders, yet occasionally they will be tasked with exploring a particular region of the galaxy at the behest of the Imperium's authorities. There are a lot of reasons such a situation might come about, and many rogue traders will be particularly resentful, as it may be specified that they themselves will not receive the exploitation rights they normally enjoy over the regions they explore. This onerous duty might be the result of the Imperium being in possession of fragmentary knowledge of an unexplored region, which, although incomplete, suggests the presence of some natural resource or otherwise desirable asset that might be of strategic value to an entire segmentum. A long-lost archival record might suggest that a region is populated by isolated human worlds or a spacefaring alien culture. Perhaps something far more sinister lurks in the black spaces on the map. Alien tomb worlds predating the evolution of humanity, esoteric stellar phenomena that challenge the understanding of the most learned of tech priests, or planet-sized superweapons placed as silent sentinels by long-extinct civilizations. All of these things might trigger a rogue trader mission to investigate matters, often accompanied by senior members of the Adeptus Mechanicus or members of the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition. It may seem at first glance that some newly appointed rogue traders might be tempted to simply sail away into the great unknown without undertaking any of their obligations to the Imperium. Indeed, many are so tempted, and some do try to escape. These individuals soon find out that the Imperium is not so foolish as to allow the rogue trader to get away without first putting in place at least one contingency plan. The most common method of ensuring a rogue trader complies with the conditions of their Warrant of Trade is to ensure there are very powerful representatives of the Imperium on hand to remind them of their obligations. This might be an Administratum prefect, but it might also be an agent of a more obscure division, perhaps even of the Inquisition. On occasion, the rogue trader might find their flotilla accompanied by one or more Space Marine vessels, and sometimes these will be serving as much as a reminder of the conditions of their warrant as to enforce the power of the Imperium on its enemies. Sometimes the rogue trader's compliance might be guaranteed by more subtle means, such as the promise of further powers or the granting of additional assets at various stages in a voyage. If a rogue trader has to make a number of diversions and fulfill a number of tasks before even reaching the fringes of the Emperor's demesne, then they may be reliant on the Imperium to replenish their forces before they leave Imperial space. There might also be more insidious contingencies put in place. Members of a ship's crew could be agents of the Imperium, and it is not unknown for actual assassins to be emplaced aboard a rogue trader's flagship as insurance against non-compliance or betrayal. There are two broad classifications of rogue trader: those personally granted the Warrant of Trade, and those who have inherited it from a forebear. The granting of a Warrant of Trade has the potential to establish a hugely powerful imperial noble line, which, if successful, can grow over the generations to become equal to the most ancient of navigator and merchant houses. Many of the scions of these houses will hold the title Rogue Trader and wield the authority of the Warrant, yet in the main these powers reside predominantly with the line's titular head. Such individuals must bear the weight of tradition and expectation, and are in the main every bit as driven and able as the ancestor first granted the warrant. On their shoulders rests the duty of maintaining the warrant and their family line's continued existence, driving them to continue the mission of the rogue trader, exploring the benighted regions beyond the fringes, and returning with unimagined riches and glory. Some rogue trader houses become split with internal strife, the various scions competing with one another for power and the favor of the line's head. In houses where the head exercises complete control, the various members with a chance of inheriting leadership might squabble and maneuver against one another, some even resorting to intimidation or assassination to ensure it is they, and not an older sibling, who inherits the warrant at the dynastic head's passing. Though some rogue trader houses may become riven with internecine civil war, most will invariably maintain an outward appearance of respectable propriety, lest their competitors sense weakness and move against them. It takes a powerful head of house indeed to maintain order amongst competing offspring, while also furthering the interests of their house and containing any collateral damage. Even in the face of outright rebellion against the Imperium, many heads of rogue trader houses will support their offspring. Whatever the background of any given rogue trader, he or she will be possessed of a quite exceptional drive to succeed and to prosper. These men and women stand above the teeming masses of the Imperium, the sheer force of their personality propelling them to achieve great things in service to the Emperor and themselves. Often these personality tropes are intrinsically linked to the rogue trader's background, but not always. Sometimes a rogue trader will transcend their roots, defying their background and only displaying their true nature once out amongst the unexplored regions of space. Many rogue traders are scoundrels of the worst order, despite all the trappings of power they display. Such individuals carry themselves with swaggering self-assurance, and through long practice are able to bluff their way into the courts of kings and the bedchambers of princesses with equal panache. The scoundrel looks to turn every possible situation to their own personal advantage, and will often take risks others would find reckless, gambling with their own life and those of all their servants. Violence is rarely the first option for such rogue traders, and they often maintain a mask of self-effacing amiability. Beneath this facade lurks a keen mind and a skilled warrior able to take on most enemies and win. Some rogue traders of this personality type combine bravado with daring, often leading expeditions to newly discovered worlds in person. Leading a small retinue of trusted associates, such rogue traders get themselves into all manner of entanglements, but always seem to escape relatively unharmed, invariably carrying some priceless artifact that will seal their fortune. Others turn their vessels into privateers, enjoying a career as a buccaneer preying on the shipping of alien empires and human rivals. Merchant prince rogue traders are entirely consumed by the quest for riches, gained not by the crude application of threats or violence, but the shrewdly negotiated contract. The merchant prince seeks to establish the most lucrative of trading contracts, ensuring that the other party benefits from the deal, but not nearly so much as they do. Merchant prince rogue traders will go to great lengths to avoid military action, believing it a waste of resources. Yet they have no qualms about employing the trappings of military power as an aid to diplomatic or commercial negotiations when necessary. Furthermore, no rogue trader would be so foolish as to neglect the defense of their assets, and the merchant prince understands the value of their resources better than most. They will, as such, take great steps to protect their investments against competitors and pirates and maintain the very best personal guards. The merchant rogue trader seeks to establish vast networks of profit, negotiating exclusive trading rights throughout the regions they explore. This has, on occasion, landed such individuals in conflict with the Imperium's authorities, as the rogue trader trades with aliens they should destroy, or allows long-lost human civilizations to remain lost to all bar them, so that they have exclusive access to the archaeotech that is so valued by the Adeptus Mechanicus and coveted by the idle rich of the Imperium's noble houses. There are plenty of rogue traders for whom the greatest drive is the simple joy of pushing back the boundaries of the Imperium, filling in the blank spaces on the galaxy's maps. These men and women are ceaselessly inquisitive and often highly intelligent, a combination of traits not generally encouraged in the Imperium's servants. Yet such a combination often proves ideal in a rogue trader, and those few who attain such rank often prove highly successful recipients of the Warrant of Trade. To the explorer, the most hostile of environments is a challenge to be faced head-on, and the most fearsome of slavering alien beasts is a fascinating opportunity for study and interaction, or sometimes autopsy. The explorer is ever keen to don an enviro suit and plunge headlong into the most dangerous or bizarre of alien landscapes. Despite the risks they take, often without even realizing the danger, many of these explorers appear to be watched over by the Emperor himself. They somehow survive encounters in nightmare-infested Deathworld jungles or haunted alien tomb worlds when others would have fled screaming. Rogue traders of this type often delegate the less stimulating aspects of their rank and its duties to their underlings or associates. The master-at-arms of such a rogue trader may find themselves exasperated as they time and again finds themselves rescuing the rogue trader from danger, while the ship's factotum will have to carry the burden of maintaining the rogue trader's fortune. The explorer is often far more concerned with following some obscure archival reference to a lost world of alien wonders than they are with the responsibilities that come with being the head of a largely mercantile rogue trader house. The missionary rogue trader believes in the literal truth of the Imperial Creed when it states that humankind is the rightful sole inheritor of the galaxy, and that all other intelligent species are merely squatters on worlds that belong to the Imperium as a result of this divinely inspired manifest destiny. They seek out lost human colonies to bring to them the word of the Imperial truth, and they go to great lengths to convert, often forcibly, those they see as benighted by ignorance of the God Emperor. Rogue traders of this ilk are often granted the Warrant of Trade to conquer regions of space that have resisted the attentions of the Missionarius Galaxia, the arm of the Adeptus Administratum tasked with the propagation of the Imperial Creed. Yet they are more than ranting demagogues, and what sets them above the itinerant preachers of the Missionarius is a drive to profit as well as to preach. They see the establishment of profitable commerce with recontacted human societies as part of the great scheme put in motion when the Emperor first went out into the stars 10,000 standard years ago during the Great Crusade and found human societies lost for millennia from a prior age of exploration and settlement. It is their mission to bring such people back into the fold, and the establishment of the Imperial Creed among them is the first essential step in that process. The missionary rogue trader suffers the Xenos poorly, seeing little or no value in establishing profitable trading relationships with alien worlds. More likely, they will seek to suppress such cultures and limit their influence, ensuring their alien creeds do not spread to taint the hearts of humanity. Such rogue traders are often accompanied on their voyages by an army of ecclesiarchy representatives who they will make every effort to establish on any lost human-settled worlds they discover. The Diplomat rogue trader seeks to spread the influence of the Imperium wherever they may, expanding its power to encompass the entirety of navigable space. This type of rogue trader is a pragmatist, knowing that some alien species must be tolerated, even supported, while others must be crushed. The tools of their trade are words as well as weapons, and they are adept at negotiating with even the most belligerent societies, whether human or alien, that they might encounter amongst the stars. Such rogue traders often find themselves in conflict with other imperial interests, particularly those who condemn Xenos as worthy only of annihilation. Yet they believe that it is they, and they alone who sees the wider truth, knowing that humanity is assailed by countless foes and that some alliances must be made if the Imperium is to prevail in an ultimately hostile universe. It is the diplomat who is able to gain the confidence of the inscrutable craft world Aldari, earning such trust as to be allowed to set foot on their craft worlds. It is they who may turn the path of an alien invasion, negotiating a truce that allows both parties to extricate themselves from a war neither would ultimately stand to gain from. Despite their skill with words, the diplomat has an innate understanding of when they will serve no purpose and when weapons must be used instead. They have the instinctive ability to size up their foes, often upon first contact, gauging the true intention behind their words and actions. When necessary, they will open fire first and open negotiations later, and that is, ultimately, the secret to their success. Some individuals are little more than madmen, creatures of instinct and slaves to their own desires. Some would claim that any individual who has attained such high rank as to be awarded the Warrant of Trade must harbor within themselves something of this trait. Regardless of their background or personality type, any rogue trader could be called upon to order the extermination of an entire species or the destruction of an entire world. All such individuals, it is sometimes said, must be psychopathic to a greater or lesser degree, regardless of the facade behind which such a trait is hidden. Some rogue traders surrender themselves entirely to their inner darkness, dispensing their own personal brand of imperial justice and retribution as they penetrate the outer darkness. They deal with those they come into contact with according to their own shattered moral compass. They are as likely to take personal control over a rediscovered human society as they are to devastate it from orbit, and are often capricious and unpredictable, with a habit of dismissing subordinates for the slightest of misdeeds, whether real or imagined. Many such underlings are invited to make their own way back to Imperial territory, the lucky ones in a lifeboat, the unlucky ones on foot via an airlock. Many of these wild and murderous individuals are highly idiosyncratic in their methods and the style in which they interpret and enact their mission amongst the stars. They might style themselves after figures of legend, some even comparing themselves to the Emperor's Primarchs and seeking to emulate the deeds of the Great Crusade in which the Imperium was forged 10,000 standard years ago. Some give themselves and their vessels ridiculously grand titles, such as Grand Conqueror, Emperor's Light, or Scourge of Xenos. With wanton enthusiasm, they wage war on any and all they consider to be an enemy of the Imperium. Some spend a lifetime out beyond the fringes, laying waste to Emperor knows how many worlds, while others return periodically to the Imperium, announcing their deeds and expecting all manner of grand receptions and official ceremonies. Many take on one foe too many and simply disappear from the annals of the Imperium's history. The Warrant of Trade is a potent document, not only allowing rogue traders to trade beyond the bounds of the Imperium and operate beyond Imperial oversight, but also make war in the Emperor's name. While many rogue traders make use of a minor war or conflict at some point in their careers, some favor war over all other endeavors. These bloodthirsty rogue traders are commonly known by the general populace of the Imperium as traders militant, and their warrant is often referred to by their fellows as a warlord warrant. These traders militant behave in a similar fashion as a senior Imperial military commander. Their warrant sanctions them to conscript and equip great numbers of troops, to maintain these troops under arms in addition to their private house troops, to contract with mercenary corps, and even enlist the aid of Astra Militarum, Navis Imperialis or Adeptus Astartes units, and the average trader militant makes good use of these capabilities. A true trader militant is a rare breed, however. Though their warrants may technically allow them the right to requisition troops, the reality is many Imperial governors and senior members of the Imperial Adepta have the political and military power to resist these requests. Therefore, traders militant tend to be either rogue traders who already possess great wealth and political power of their own, or proven and reliable former servants of the Imperium, such as high-ranking Imperial Guard and Imperial Navy officers granted a warrant of trade as a reward for their deeds. Along with the warrant to act outside of the Imperium's laws, the Warrant of Trade often comes with a great many trappings attached to it. While many rogue traders have significant resources of their own to call upon, they are usually given command over an entire fleet and ground forces to aid them in their mission beyond the fringes. If they are not already in possession of a void ship by dint of current rank, a newly appointed rogue trader may be given a flagship, often a cruiser. Every vessel in the Imperial Fleet's registry is a precious asset, and capital ships are not squandered, for they take solar decades, even entire Terran centuries to construct in the Adeptus Mechanicus's orbital shipyards, and can tie up the equivalent of many standard years' worth of planetary industrial output. Nonetheless, the appointment of a rogue trader is an event of great import, and the Imperial authorities would not, or not often, wish a new recipient of the warrant to fall to pirate attack the instant he or she sets out. The Imperium expects great things of its rogue traders and will make every effort to ensure that they are equipped for the dangerous missions they will face. Alongside their flagship, a rogue trader may be accompanied by frigates and other escorts, as well as a multitude of cargo vessels, tenders, processing or refining vessels, and many more auxiliaries. If the rogue trader is not already versed in the skills needed to command a fleet and has not appointed a servant who is, then the authorities will find one qualified to handle the day-to-day running of the flotilla. Most rogue traders are the sort of people who want to take total, personal command of their fleets, and will soon learn the skills needed to do so. Those who do not tend not to live very long in the perilous regions of the galaxy beyond the fringes of Imperial rule. Other significant assets gifted to a rogue trader may include ground troops. Entire Astra Militarum regiments may be seconded to them, along with all the auxiliary support units needed to maintain them and advisors to aid in their use and deployment. Though such gifts are considered temporary attachments, in reality it is likely to prove permanent. Rogue traders are expected to meet any threat that waits in the dark, and the Imperial Guard is often at the sharp end of such conflicts, and so unlikely to be returned to serve elsewhere even if the soldiers survive such service. Some rogue traders issue such troops uniforms of their own design, and it is not uncommon for attached Imperial Guard units to wear a tabard or sash over their regular uniforms, bearing the colors and heraldry of their new lord and master. In addition to military forces, a rogue trader may be provided with a vast army of bureaucrats, administrators, clerks, artisans, and advisors drawn from the ranks of the Adeptus Administratum. These are intended to serve the needs of administrating any worlds conquered in the course of the fleet's travels. Plenty of rogue trader fleets are furthermore accompanied by entire populations of colonists, volunteers or otherwise, who will settle newly discovered worlds so that the Imperium's borders are expanded from one generation to the next. In some cases, the rogue trader will install relatives or trusted followers as a new ruling class, ensuring the new colony owes fealty to them as well as to the Imperium. A rogue trader and their team are more than merely a ship's captain and their crew. They are a grand legacy, which often stretches back hundreds or even thousands of standard years. The first rogue trader militants in the days of the Great Crusade were given mandates to ply the stars and expand the control and reach of the Emperor, and in exchange, they could harvest the wealth such freedom would bring. Today's rogue traders are the descendants of these first rogue traders militant, and the many that have come after. All of those that serve in the rogue trader's crew, not just the rogue trader, will be part of this dynasty. This legacy is important for crew members to remember, as they need to know that they are more than ordinary Imperial citizens. They are rare individuals, chosen for greatness, who possess power to shape the very destiny of the Imperium itself. It is also a source of great pride for those members of a rogue trader's crew to know that they are a cut above the average citizen, gifted with special rights and blessed with a favored role in the Emperor's grand designs. Part of this status that all the crew members share also means that to a degree, they are all equally important. Though ultimately the rogue trader controls the ship and the main decisions that affect the entirety of the ship and its course into the void, It is their crew that are equally essential in playing a role in the destiny of the rogue trader's dynasty. Within the Imperium, there are those who sit at the pinnacle of power, the nobility and the ruling elite. As the Imperium is structured as a feudal society, it stands to reason that within it exist many types of noble houses, including planetary rulers, military lords, and the rogue traders. Over time, once the Warrant of Trade has been granted, a rogue trader may find that their personal empire is growing. The dynasty now has fleets of starships, planetary fiefdoms, and thousands of house soldiers to call upon. As time goes on and the house continues to grow, it develops into a rogue trader dynasty, able to command scores of voidcraft and countless troops. This legacy spans the Imperium and beyond. To ensure that this legacy continues, the lords and ladies of the dynasty designate an heir apparent in whatever fashion is deemed appropriate by their customs. These sons and daughters may find themselves struggling for the favor of their dynastic leaders in an effort to be worthy of succession. Oftentimes, in imperial noble families, the second, third, and even fourth child finds themselves with little option but to go out and make a name for themselves, or simply languish in obscurity, hoping that circumstances arise to change their fate. However, this is not the case in rogue trader families, where all are expected to work and prove themselves. It is oftentimes that these noble scions end up plotting and scheming for ways to maneuver into a position where the family leader has little choice but to name them heir. The children of the rogue trader houses are instructed in all manner of subjects mundane and esoteric. They are assigned the best tutors and mentors the house can afford, and by the time the child enters adolescence, they are capable enough to be sent out into the wider galaxy, typically with bodyguard entourage in tow. They have been afforded every advantage, as the future of their house rests upon their shoulders. Not every rogue trader dynasty heir apparent turns out to be the best choice for the family, however. Some are lazy, shiftless souls who do nothing more than squander the family fortunes and pass their days in decadence and perversion. In such cases, the leaders of these dynasties often select more than one heir to the house's throne. It is a gamble they make to ensure that at least one of them survives to continue the dynasty. Rogue trader heirs are often assigned one of the family's void ships under the command of one of their most capable captains, or a family scion that has more days behind them than ahead. The scion of the house is then given a stipend and sent to learn about the unforgiving galaxy. If along the way they make gains for the house, so much the better. Some return upon their majority to assume the title they have been ordained for. Others are never seen or heard from again. Oftentimes, a rival family member covets the throne of the house at the expense of all else. These miserable sods plot and scheme the downfall of their siblings and relatives. They may arrange an accident to befall other heirs so that they alone remain to assume the house's leadership. Thus, many heirs, especially from the larger dynasties, are taught to be wary and look out for such plots. Many surround themselves with capable allies and protectors, but in the end, survival often comes down to their own wits and instincts. Many learn not only the intricacies of political longevity, but martial arts and other forms of combat as well. This is by far the best means to ensure they live long enough to return home and assume the privileges and rank that they have been groomed all their lives for. The ability to successfully wage war is crucial to the survival of a rogue trader, as surely as are their skills in business, diplomacy, and void-faring. It is the strong arm and the implicit threat of violence that lend weight to an individual's words in the Imperium. Indeed, in a place as lawless and God-Emperor forsaken as the Coronis Expanse, a rogue trader's martial prowess is often the only measure by which others judge them. Knowing this, a wise rogue trader studies war with the same fervor as they study markets and currencies. They know the value of war to the nearest throne, understanding that the true cost of war is reflected in more than banking ledgers and casualty lists. A rogue trader must be able to weigh every factor in war, from costs and benefits to the social and political ramifications. This is what sets a rogue trader apart from a common Chartist captain or business concern. They have the ability to raise an army and a fleet of void ships to carry it, and the legal, moral, and ethical backing of the Adeptus Administratum that allows them to use them as they see fit. This makes them unique among their noble peers. Unique and dangerous, for the rights and responsibilities granted in a warrant of trade, especially those pertaining to waging war in the name of the God Emperor, can be so easily and so tragically misused. Warfare is an intricate dance full of ever-shifting alliances and uncertain futures, and is not to be entered into lightly. When committed, a rogue trader must pursue it with all of the strength, courage, and violence that they can muster. Only then will they see the fruits of their violent labors. Taking part in a war, whether as a belligerent or simply an interested party, is expensive, risky, deadly, and has brought ruin to more rogue trader houses than can be counted. Why then do so many pursue it? The answers to these questions are as varied and as telling as the men and women who give them. There is no constant, no prescribed list of conditions that can decide when waging a war is prudent or not. One thing is for certain, though. While the benefits of waging war can be truly staggering and may make a rogue trader a king, the cost of failure is always death, whether true death or the myriad of little deaths like humiliation, loss of power, loss of wealth, or even enslavement. These are all important issues to keep in mind when approaching war, though they are by no means the only ones, and it is a fool who disregards their importance.